Silver Viper Minerals Corp is a Canadian-based and listed junior gold and silver exploration company focused on exploration in a state of Mexico called Sonora, which is the gold state. This is where lots of gold gets discovered in Mexico. The company operates its 100% owned La Virginia gold-silver project. It's an early-stage exploration property. It targets dikes and breccia zones, hosting epithermal-style gold-silver mineralization. You would think I actually knew some of this stuff. It's scary, isn't it? Silver Viper has announced a maiden resource of 700,000 gold ounces equivalent, which is a substantial maiden resource. Well done, Steve. That's fantastic. And that is sufficient for an open pit heap leach mine to be developed. But Steve is seeing potential for an underground mine at El Rubi as well. So he's got himself a potential gold mine, and he's going for more. He's going for a tier 1. And he's expecting results from a much deeper geophysical test shortly. So we were talking about these in January, and I think they're sort of just about around the corner. So Steve, he's the CEO and president of Silver Viper Minerals Corp. He's live from Vancouver, and he's a lovely man to boot. So what's not to love? Steve Cope.
Thank you, Donald. That was a lovely introduction, and you're right. There's certainly a lot going on right now at Silver Viper. You mentioned the geophysics, and we're actually have a slide in here for the first time that's got some preliminary results from that geophysics program, which I'm excited to share with everyone. I will be making some forward-looking statements today, so I'll draw everyone's attention to that slide. When you're looking to invest in a precious metals exploration company, I think there's 3 things that you really need to focus on. 1, that it has a high quality asset. 2, that it's got lots of potential. And 3, that it has a strong management and shareholder group behind it. As we go through the presentation, I'm sure you'll see that we certainly check off all 3 of those boxes, with the biggest focus right now being on the lots of potential kind of moving forward. We've got that maiden resource. It's an awesome maiden resource. It already shows that El Rubi is mineable open pit heap leach, which is very important and the main method of mining in the state of Sonora in Mexico. But I think we're just scratching the surface. I really do think this has the potential to grow to a tier 1 asset. A lot of it is based around a lot of the stuff that we've seen already in that geophysics program. And so I will really dive in moving forward here. But again, I think this checks off every box that you should be looking for in a precious metals exploration company. Just quickly, the project's located 220 kilometers east of Hermosillo. You take a paved highway all the way to the town of Nicori Chico, and from there we're about 30 minutes in on a gravel and dirt road. We're up here fairly high up in the Sierra Madres. This particular trend is really not explored in the state because of some of the terrain you can see there in that picture. We have very good access, and our terrain, actually our Rubi especially, you'll see moving forward here, is actually quite favorable for open pit mining. But a lot of this particular trend is underexplored because they don't have roads and they don't have access. So as far as modern operations go, you got LT grade 90 kilometers to the north in the trend, and then 100K to the south is Dolores, which is a Pan American Silver mine. It was found by mine finders and sold to Pan American Silver for 1.5 billion, and it was actually mine finders that flew this whole mountain range looking for another Dolores and settled on La Virginia being the lookalike. Just quickly, here you can see our claims package. All the claims in red we acquired from Pan American Silver. We own those 100% already. We gave them a 2% NSR on the project to acquire all of the historic data, all of the physical drill core, the database, and then 100% ownership of their claims. The claims in blue, you can see the option payments there, which we're 3 years in. We have our 4th payment coming up here in the next couple months. Heavily back-end loaded on purpose to allow the money to go in the ground, drilling to evaluate and build value in the project. Of note, though, that final payment, half of that can be paid in shares at our discretion. There's also a 2% NSR just on those blue claims, which we have the right to buy back for $2 million in the first 5 years or $3 million for the life of the project after that. I won't spend too much time on this slide other than you can see a picture there. That is El Rubi. That is the flat plateau. It's 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, in diameter. Where our resource is on the southern end or closer to the photograph here coming off of that plateau. You can see that large kind of spine sticking up out of the ground. That is a silicified dike, and those outcrop and run for over 100K north-south on the project. They're in parallel sequence, and a lot of the mineralization happens adjacent and into those dikes. Again, I mentioned that the topography at El Rubi is favorable for open pit mining, and again, that would be because our deposit is coming off the southern end. It's flatter, it's not as steep terrain. You're not going to have much of a pit wall or any on the southern side until you get to the bottom of the arroyo. So again, very good for strip ratios, good for, just gravity being your friend. And then we've got lots of land off to the west that you'd be able to build your mill or build your mill right up on El Rubi, depending on what we end up finding there. But again, very favorable. We got water year round. There's a brand new power line corridor that's been installed right through the heart of the deposit that connects that town of Chico to the next town down the road. So again, lots of exciting things happening, and again, very good environment for finding mining. And this particular state of Mexico is the #1 gold producing state in the country, and I believe #3 in silver. Again, this is just talking about kind of some of the work that we're doing this year. The biggest being this geophysics survey that we were waiting forever on, and like I said, that's been completed now. We've started to get our preliminary results of all the 2D images. And then, in the next couple of weeks, we'll get a final package with all the final data and the 3D imagery that they'll create for us. But just right off the bat, these are what the 2D images look like, these two images on the right. And up in the left here where the circle is, you can see kind of that resistivity high that is El Rubi. And then in that image below, you can see where it says blind target and a very, very large resistivity target. We believe that we did this geophysics looking for what would happen at depth below El Rubi. We see sulfides that are coming up in our core that have been blasted from deeper that run extremely high grades of gold and silver, as well as high grade base metals, which we don't see high up in El Rubi. And so we've always said there's something feeding this of size down below. We had one fund take a large investment in us based on a model that the big win on this project would be at depth. And so I'm not a geophysicist, but that's a pretty obvious target when you compare what El Rubi looks like and seeing the resistivity there and this thing at depth. And then on top of that, as we move to the east, you can see another blind target here. That came as a surprise. We had some geochem anomalies at surface there, but we haven't been drilling at all in that area. And so again, another very attractive target. And we've put a couple of shallow holes into Peridonis, but it looks again like there's a very nice target at depth on Peridonis. So that's just one small portion of the geophysics that we've got results back from. We're really excited about this El Molino South area that you can see on the image on the left where El Molino is and the lines were run. We've just had some recent very high grade chip sampling done down in that area, which, that be potential for another parallel trend to El Rubi. And, you find a few more El Rubis and you're up to a tier 1 asset very quickly. Just again, this is El Rubi and that plateau. Our favorable horizon for mineralization has been this andesite agglomerate. Once we get into the rhyolites, the mineralization's tighter. But again, that deep geophysics, and what we're looking for is the contact between the rhyolites and the next package below, which could again be andesites, but it also could be the meta sediments or the limey sediments. And that's this type of deposit where you get these massive winds, is at that contact and where you get the base metals picking up, and it's that carbonate side. And similar deposits around the world are multi-million ounce gold deposits that are getting tier 1 assets in countries like Australia and Indonesia. Dolores to the south of ours is one of these types of deposits. So again, we're very excited about what that geophysics has shown us, and very excited to test that moving forward here in the near future. Here's another cartoon of kind of what that type of system and what we're envisioning, where you get the epithermal quartz gold silver, the high grade gold and silver like we see at El Rubi up near the surface. But again, down deep, you see this carbonate base metal gold part of the deposit. And again, that's what we'll be testing and what we think that large geophysical anomaly down deep is. This is just another example of why we thought we were onto that type of deposit. You can see some of the sulfides here that were blasted up from down deep in the system, and with some very attractive base metal grades associated with it. That is not the norm of El Rubi. Most of El Rubi has no base metals. So you get the odd half-meter sample where you get some chunky sulfides, that have come from down at depth. And like I said, we want to find out where the roots of that system are. When we got involved, there was a historic area about 3 to 4 kilometers south of El Rubi that was, they drilled over 50,000 meters between Pan American and Mine Finders on the project. But we saw right off the bat when we were evaluating the project that, this portion of the project had never even been mapped. It hadn't been sampled. And El Rubi was our #1 target. We put 5 reconnaissance holes into our first phase of drilling on the project, made a discovery. Since then, El Rubi has gotten bigger and better, leading right up to that maiden resource that we've referenced a couple times, the 700,000 gold equivalent ounces, split about 60% gold, 40% silver. You know, it's been a fantastic discovery, and I think there's a lot more to El Rubi, like you said, at depth, but also expanding the open pit portion of El Rubi as we move north along that plateau all the way up to Ruby North, which sits on the very end of that plateau, where we've got a lot of really good geochem samples, and we've done a little bit of drilling up there that's shown that it's mineralized as well. Probably hard for a lot of people to see, the numbers are very small, but again, you can see some very flashy, very nice high grades. That's our main breccia structure. But what makes El Rubi special, and where we talk about the open pit heap leach mining, is that we get this breccia structure that runs these kilogram plus silver numbers and high grade gold. And then in the footwall of the main El Rubi structure, we get these widths that are 20 to 80 meters wide that run kind of that gram to gram and a half gold equivalent. And that's where the open pit heap leach site comes in. And then we made a discovery 100 meters to the west of El Rubi that we called our western zone. And in that zone, we were hitting, you know, 100 plus meter wide intervals of gram to gram and a half gold numbers. And so you combine those two, and you get a very attractive open pit heap leach grade of, in our resource, we're about 0.8 gold, and then have another half gram gold of silver, which shows that it can be recoverable as well. And the average open pit heap leach mine in the state of Sonora operates at about a half gram gold average grade. So we're well above the average grade of the other operations in the area. We've got very good recoveries. So, and you know, the main thing about those open pit heap leach operations is just adding tons, and that's, you know, what we're going to continue to do at Rubi. But a lot of them start at, you know, 500,000 gold ounces, and then they just kind of keep operating until they run out of ore. So, you know, that's not our model. It's not ours to jump in, but that's why I think we've already got something that's very attractive for the smaller miners to get involved with. Now what we're trying to do is convert it into something that the big major mining companies are going to want to buy and operate. Again, just some pictures of core, and you can see the outline of where our pit is. We'll jump in here. You can see our maiden resource, the bulk of it being El Rubi, and then the rest of this is the historic area where mine finders and Pan Am were focused on. Having El Rubi allows us to put some open pits, some open starter pits in that historic area, but the topography there isn't as favorable, so you do lose a lot of ounces at, you know, the current metals prices that you'll gain back as metal prices move up and you can expand those pits. But you're able to put those pits on there because of what we have at El Rubi, and showing that we would already have enough tons and ounces in that area. And then we've started a small underground resource on the historic area. There's no underground resource on El Rubi yet, and I would look to start to develop an underground resource on the next resource update. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that is you can see here on this image kind of the block model, that just a little bit of the block model that's outside of the pit shell at the moment. And there wasn't enough tons there to include it in an underground resource, but that was running about 15 grams gold and 300 silver just in those blocks. So you know, if you're mining it, you'd scoop it up with a shovel. But again, very attractive, and showing again the potential for El Rubi in an underground resource as well. Yeah, this is one of the original sections that started to show us that we weren't on to a traditional Mexican epithermal model. And the main reason here, you can see in this same hole, you had high-grade gold and silver at surface. 300 meters down, you still had high-grade gold and silver with no base metals. And in a traditional Mexican epithermal model, you know, base metals would be taking over from the gold and silver at that point, and that's not the case here. So that's where, again, we're talking about that gold carbonate base metal system, and something at depth that's feeding this, that yes, it's epithermal in nature, but it's not your traditional Mexican, you know, vein. We've got, you know, our disseminated bodies, we've got this stuff coming from down at depth, and so I think it does show that it's got a lot of size potential that a lot of the other Mexican kind of epithermal systems just don't have, or it would take a lot more drilling to prove out the ounces because you're following a single vein for, you know, a long ways. This was done after our resource, and one of the things that we've already done this year is we've been filling in the drilling to the south. So again, we've already expanded on that resource. It'll be included when we do the next resource update, but there's about 300 meters here to the bottom of the arroyo where we filled in and have mineralization all the way down to the bottom of the arroyo. We had done some shallow hole, or some holes down in the bottom prior to the resource. They were spaced out, you know, too far that they wouldn't be included in the resource, but that has filled in fairly nicely as we move down the resource. So again, we'll be adding ounces into the open pit portion. To the north here, again, this geophysics is really going to help us vector in, and we're seeing kind of how El Rubi is shifted to the north, which we'd always suspected. So that's going to allow us to vector in moving forward here and continue to expand the open pit to the north. Metallurgy, always very important when you're looking at deposits like this. Again, very good recoveries in gold, above 90% across all the grade ranges. And silver even leaching very well, you know, and especially in the low grade sample, leaching at 76% is great because, you know, that makes it a very big component of any open pit heap leach operation, especially with the amount of silver that we already have on the project. One of the benefits of our group is it sits within the Belcara group of companies, so that allows us to share a G&A cost amongst 3 different public companies. We've got Barcelli Minerals, Oryx Minerals, and Silver Viper, and then 1 private vehicle that we'd like to take public when we find the right project for it. But it's a group with a track record of success. It allows us to have 3 senior geologists on staff, and they work on all the different projects, even though one will take the lead on each company. And I think that's invaluable, just them bouncing ideas and looking at projects. It gives us a huge advantage over single asset, single company groups. And just quickly, you can see our share structure is still a very attractive share structure. Current price is very low. It's created a big opportunity for people to get involved right now. I mean, all of our peers have been coming off, but for what we already have and the catalyst that we see coming, again, I think it's a very easy buy in the market at the moment. You can see our ticker symbols there. We're very strong on the institutional side. There's about 20 funds that own the stock. Those are some of the bigger positions there that you can see. Again, management very involved, and that's a staple of all the Belcara Group companies. Management owning over 20%. We believe the best place to invest is in ourselves. Again, I think we're running a little low on time, and I'd like to get to questions, but ESG is something that's been very important to, as we move forward, and we're seeing more and more investors concerned and wanting to know what we're doing, and it's something we've always done. But, we're big on anything we can do as far as recycling water, donating to local communities. 90% of our workforce comes from the local communities. We're big on training, helping out schools. We've been doing medical things during COVID. Providing medical supplies, anything we can do to help out. We think it's very important to be with our community and work with our community. And it's been overwhelming supportive in that local community and wanting us to succeed and helping us succeed. With that, in summary, we've got a high quality asset. We're in a great jurisdiction, strong management technical team, lots of potential and strong shareholder support. And with that, I thank you for your time, and it would be great to open it up and answer some questions.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to take you back to your very positive Maiden Resource. Where did you go with that? You've got 700,000 ounces there. That's already in the bag. How will that be operated? The open pit heap leach gold and silver mine, is that a given? Do you think that's going to be developed?
It's a given start, and it's there. And we've had major miners on site that have looked at it and are very excited about what we've already found. We've got some that are diving into the database right now. So I think it's a given that it's going to be mined. It's a question of which size company mines it. If it's the major miners, they'd like to see us find maybe another El Rubi or double the El Rubi size to kind of meet their thresholds.
And but what are their thresholds? 5 million?
No, companies like Agnico Eagle, Pan American, they're sitting there. If you're 1 million plus gold ounces in that part of the woods of that type of mining, they're definitely involved and keenly looking at it. One of the benefits we have is that because we've got gold and silver, we appeal to both majors on both sides, especially the silver miners, because there's just not a lot of silver out there. So
why is silver so attractive?
There's a shortage. It's hard. Those silver producers, it's hard to find primary silver deposits. So you look at a
silver
company
get used for industrial purposes.
Very much so. And when you start talking about, the electric cars and solar and everything and all the components of that, I think the last 2 or 3 years we've operated at a shortage of the world. There's been more silver being used than what's being mined out of the ground. And, even with the recycling numbers, which most people in the industry don't believe are true, that they're able to recover what they can from those complex components, it's still a massive shortage. And the thing with silver and the way it forms in the ground is the easy silver has been found, and it's not like gold where you get it at different depths. Kind of silver close to surface has been found for the most part, or what's left needs a much higher price to be mined. And so as we move forward, and there's such a push for infrastructure and electric cars and all these different components that you need, you don't have the silver. It doesn't exist in this world. And so like a company like Pan American Silver is the second largest silver producer in the world. 70% of their production is gold right now. And, you know, they've been transitioning and that ratio has been getting worse and worse because the assets they do add tend to be more gold dominated with silver credits versus being primary silver deposits.
It's absolutely fascinating. Okay, so park that thought there. Let's go to El Rubi at depth. So that's it. We've sorted out your open pit mine. What about in depth? You're talking about the geophysics. How much of that has actually been released to the market, or are you just giving us a bit of a sneaky peek at the moment?
I'm giving you a sneaky peek. That was the first time anyone has seen that slide. So there you go.
There you go. You got an exclusive in London Southeast.
Yeah. No, it's you know,
how excited are you by those discoveries? Put those in context for us.
So far, I mean, again, it's preliminary, and we'll see what the final report looks like. But I know the geology team is very excited. You know, we went in doing that geophysics, trying to target and see if it would light something up that would show us, you know, is there potential for the roots? Is it close enough that we can go and test something? And there, lo and behold, is a massive bullseye on that preliminary data sitting right below El Rubi. You know, that could be, just, you know, that was the model. That's what we were hoping to see. We wanted to see something like that. So
presumably, life is not normally as easy as that.
No, I mean we're actually normally a pretty jaded group on geophysics. And say, you know, geophysics is great after you've already found something and defined something, and then you look back on the geophysics and it shows you like, oh yeah, look, see how it tied in. But you know, we had a model here. We, you know, yes, we have a discovery. We know we've already got something at El Rubi, but we wanted to see something, a change in rock type, which that very much shows that could potentially be that contact and where the source of where those sulfides are coming from. And like I said, similar deposits around the world, when you hit into that zone, you know, as long as, you know, that's bonanza grades of gold and base metals and becomes multi-million ounce gold deposits.
What's the next step then? Do you get a much larger rig up there? Do you start to drill and start to prove that resource?
Yeah, the drilling company's on standby. They've got a rig ready for us to go, and yes, we will be bringing in a larger rig to test that as soon as we get the final report and, or, you know, define where our best spots to drill are. But, you know, on El Rubi at depth with the larger rig, and then we've got our man portable rig that will continue to move around and start testing that one to the east, and then going back to Perdones, El Molino South.
And is the other rig doing it more for the surface?
It's going to do, yeah, the man portable rig. It can go deep. It can go up to 1,000 meters at depth but you go down to a smaller core size as you get that deep. So it's a great rig, and it's a great rig in that terrain because we can easily move it around. We use mules to, you know, provide and source the drilling. They bring the diesel to the drill rig and carry the core back to our staging areas. And so the man portable rig is great because especially in that type of terrain. But yeah, I mean, we're excited to bring in the bigger rig and test this thing at depth.
And that's all feeding into your next resource update, is it?
Yeah, I would. I mean, we'll see what happens with the results, but I would expect either way that at the latest we have our new resource out probably first quarter next year. You know, if we start hitting and expanding something, we might do that sooner.
Sorry, I'm getting excited on your behalf here.
I'm excited. We've been very patiently waiting for this geophysics, so I'm excited that it's finally happened and been done. And
so you've been at this 3, and it'll be 4 years before you get to that resource update. How does that make you feel? Has that been a good 3 or 4 years, or is that a long?
Well, yeah, I mean, we came out with the Maiden Resource last year, and I was excited. I mean, that was to come out with the resource that size that quick was huge for our group. I mean, it was a good catalyst for the company, and it was amazing to get that out and even to have some of the ounces up into the indicated category, not all be inferred, was, you know, just again showed how well El Rubi stuck together. But since then, we've wanted to do this geophysics, and it's just, you know, COVID and getting equipment into Mexico's taken longer than usual. But we're excited that it's finally done, and we're going to be able to provide shareholders with, you know, news flow moving forward as we test, you know, all test this together and hope that we hit, you know, a big win at depth on El Rubi. So and on some of these other targets that it's already shown us as well.
We speak to all kinds of miners, but you're very much an explore and sell miner.
It's our group's model. It's what
you're looking for an exit. So
yeah,
tell us through where you are with that, and who's talking to you.
I mean, I can't say who's talking to me. They're under.
Oh, of course you can. you can gently indicate.
Yeah, there are major miners that everyone is very familiar with that have certainly been diving in and done site visits. As far as, you know, we're going to keep expanding the project. Our job is to, you know, do what we do best, and that's to explore, discover, and grow. But my other job is for shareholders, and if someone makes an offer that is to, you know, make sense for us to sell, then that's my job to do right by shareholders, of which I'm a major one, and would be love to do it as well.
The share price is low at the moment. What
It's
would
low at the
be
moment. Yeah, no, we're not in share
what would
price
an
right now.
offer be
So
that you couldn't refuse?
I don't think they'd make it at this share price. I, you know, it depends. That can change by the week, depending if I go and I drill and hit down at depth, that number is going to dramatically change versus, you know, if we don't hit at depth, or if we make a new discovery on one of these targets to the east, and start, you know, do we find another El Ruby? Do we find 2 or 3 more El Rubies to the east? And that number can change. And I'm not going to throw that number out publicly, but it's a lot higher than where we're at today.
Well, but it's a strange thing, a low share price. It's only bad news if you've been holding at a higher price. It suddenly becomes fantastic news if you're the person who's coming in and spotting a bargain.
It's definitely, I mean, and it's not just our company, it's across the industry right now. But, you know, very much with what we have and what the catalyst that we have coming, I think we're in a very strong position. And I think it's a very easy buy for a lot of people if they're interested in gold and silver and want the upside of an exploration company, which can bring you those exponential gains, you know, those 10 baggers that everyone talks about that they're looking for in this space. And we certainly have the potential in the near term to be one of those.
I'm interested to see that the phrase 10 bagger has made it to Canada.
Oh, it's been here for a long time. It's been here my whole career.
I thought it was a UK description.
Well, we still like the Queen in Canada. We were, you know, we were still a loyal Commonwealth, unlike, you know, the Americans that ditched her. So.
Okay, right. Last question for you. Last question. Here we go. Put all your eggs into this particular basket. Give this one your all. Expected news flow over the next six months, say. What's coming up? What are the biggies?
Next we'll do a summary report once we get the final geophysics. Then there'll be a release that says we've started drilling, and that'll be bringing in the large rig to test El Ruby at depth, while we also continue to drill, you know, the rest. And then depending on lab turnaround times, you're just going to see a steady release, hopefully of kind of 5 to 10 holes at a time of data, you know, and I haven't done it yet, but hopefully there's a new discovery, news releases in there on new targets, as well as making, you know, discovery at depth on El Ruby.
And whereabouts are your labs?
We send our materials to the lab in Hermosillo, where they prepare all the materials. They run the gold numbers in Hermosillo, and then the pulps are sent up actually to Canada, into Vancouver, right where we are, and they run the multi-elements there.
Are the COVID delays a lot less than they were?
They're moving. Well, I guess I don't know. I mean, they are less than they were at the peak of COVID for sure. It's been strange. I think what's happened is a lot more work has been getting done in Sonora. A lot of more companies are drilling. And so oftentimes we're getting our multi-elements from Vancouver back before we get our gold numbers from Hermosillo, which was certainly never the case prior to COVID. We would get those back in a week, and then in about 2 weeks later, we get our multi-elements. And at times now we're getting our multi-elements before our gold numbers. And I've heard that the yard in Hermosillo, where they prep all the core, is quite busy. We've got one company, Silvercrest, that's got about 24 rigs going in the States. So they're constantly sending materials to the lab, and so it can be slow, it can be fast, it all depends on the week.
Steve Cope, that was absolutely fascinating. You've given us a real insight into silver and gold mining in Mexico. So for that, if nothing else, I thank you for joining us. You've been a complete star.
I appreciate it. It's always fun.
Yeah, no, that was lovely. Thank you. That was just such a nice exploration into a part of the world that we may or may not know much about. Well, we certainly know a lot more about it now.
We've worked there a long time. It's a very exciting part to work, and awesome place in the world to find.
I know you've got a great job. I have to say, you've got a great job, Steve.
It's fun at the best of times. So the good times, it's really fun.
In the good times. Thank you, and good night, Steve.